Shaeffer, and their daughter Susan Shaeffer is at the house as well. Mr. Shaeffer, would you give us your full name and how you spell Shaeffer?
Fred Shaeffer, S-H-A-E-F-F-E-R.
And Mrs. Zickerfoos, if you could spell Zickerfoos so we can have it correct for the record.
Z-I-C-K-E-F-O-O-S-E.
The Shaeffers and Zickerfooses both are sons and daughters of pioneers to the Sinnett area, which we're interested in covering today. And Mr. Shaeffer, as we begin, would you give us a landmark in the Sinnett area that we can refer to as we're describing things throughout the interview?
Well, I guess we'd start at the cemetery. That's about the only thing landmark that's left out there.
Yes. Can you have any recollection from history handed down through your parents as to how the Sinnett area looked when they first came there, the pioneers?
Well, as far as I know, it was all undeveloped, you know, and a lot of it was covered in timber. And the farm my dad bought just north of the cemetery, I can remember out in the big open field now, there were big trees and just stumps, and the body part of the tree is still standing there when I was a boy, 5, 6 years old. I can remember pulling them over with horses and things, clearing the field out.
A lot of these trees were just really large trees.
Yeah, and they burnt the land and killed the timber and stuff, cleaning out the farm.
Do you know if there was prairie or mixed prairie with the timber?
Well, it wasn't near as small timber like they are nowadays. That's this underbrush that we have nowadays. It was mostly big timber back then.
Yeah. And Sinnett lies north of the Cimarron River and south of the Arkansas?
The old Sinnett stores and things was 1 mile west of the cemetery, and then a half a mile back south.
Yes, sir.
And right at the crossroads there was a little town was built up there. And my Uncle Ben ran the post office there back in 1903, 4, and 5, along in there. And my dad also, in 1905, started the town of Prue, Oklahoma, in 1905. And my Uncle Ben had to sign his papers, his signatures on the paper, in which I'll give you a copy of later.
Can you go back in your ancestral history and tell us, as far back as you can remember in your family, a great-grandfather perhaps?
Well, I can remember my dad's father. I think he passed away in 1924, I believe, but I can remember him.
His name?
Peter Shaeffer, which is buried there by my father.
Would he be the first pioneer to come to the country of the Shaeffer family?
Yeah, he came here, and they came from Kansas down here.
Any idea of a reason why?
Well, Sherman Ackley had written back to us, some of them, and told them about homesteading there, and they came on down by what he told them, you know, that there's pretty good looking country in there. And Dave Shaeffer came before my dad's older brother.
Did Dave or your dad, Peter, did they tell you the trail that they came on?
No, they
or
didn't.
The route, I mean?
They, I think, are just cross country mostly. Wasn't no roads, you know. They didn't have no roads back then. They just took out across country, I guess.
Did their wives come with them, or they come here and homestead first?
Well, my dad, when they came here, Dad wasn't married, but Uncle Dave was. And I don't know where his wife.
Didn't Uncle Dave live live out in the Sinnett area, and your dad and his mother and dad lived where Keystone was,
Yeah.
because they moved when the town of Keystone was platted out.
Well, when my dad and my grandfather came, they stopped where the town of Keystone is, or used to be, and there was one family lived there on the south side of the river, and that was Walter Cox's father and mother. And Walter was, he was about, I'd say 15 then, and my dad was only about 12. He was a little bigger, and he was the first person that my dad remembered seeing when they stopped there where the old town of Keystone was.
Uh-huh. And were they the only white people at Keystone?
Yeah, they were the only ones on the south side. Now there were a few people on the north side of the river, but none on the south side of the river.
Yes. I had mentioned that, was it Mr. Cox? You said
Yeah.
that he had were two sisters,
Well,
Frankie and Serene.
That's right.
Is that how you pronounce that?
yeah.
I had heard that, but I don't.
And their uncle was buried in front of the third motel there at the Rock Inn on the side of the hill there. He was buried back there, and my dad was about 12 or 13 years old, and he was supposed to went up and set up with his two sisters that night, and they were waiting for some more of the family to get there. And the body got to smelling so bad that they had to bury him. And my father came home about, he said around 2:30 in the morning, and his dad said, "Joe?" And Dad answered him. He said, "I thought I told you several." He said, "No need, Dad. We done buried him." So he's underwater up there. They never moved the body.
Yeah.
The Cox's buried. They used to, A.D. Sellers used to keep a sandstone rock there at the grave so everybody could know where it was at.
Well, that was nice of them, wasn't
Yeah, it
it?
was.
To keep that
But
respect.
my dad was just a boy then. But they buried him about a little after midnight,
Yeah.
and they didn't have no way to embalm him or anything, you know.
I'd heard mentioned that the river was up and they couldn't cross the river at that time.
Well, Dad never said nothing about
Oh,
that.
that piece of Aunt Susie's tells about crossing the river and the river to go to school. They rode had a little boat that they rode across, but then she,
Talk louder, son.
Oh, he picks up fine.
and then part of the time they rode their horses. I will get that piece of paper, I just forgot about it.
So they had to use a boat to.
When the river was up, they used a boat, and when the river was low, they rode the horse across the river, swam the horse. Part of the time they could wade across.
If you were, well, for instance, the girls on horseback, if they forded the Cimarron,
Yeah.
was there a certain place they had to ford?
No. They used it right above where the bridge was standing when the lake went in, is where they went across.
Yeah.
But there wasn't no certain they could cross anywhere they wanted to.
Oh,
I want to read something I just found in this clipping.
Well,
It
you ought to
says-
shut it off a minute.
It says Alvin and I.
Mr. Shaeffer, you had told us how you got across the Cimarron from where Keystone came to be to go to Sinnett. And how would you go to Sinnett after you crossed the Cimarron? The old trail? Or?
There was an old dirt road went just on the east side of Old Dry Lake, and it circled around and came out up the Sinnett. It just kind of made a circle in there, just a wagon road. But the road went on the east side of Dry Lake,
Yes.
and where the road originally then was on the west side of it. But the old wagon road went around on the east side of Dry Lake, up
Oh,
over the hill there. Walter Holmes's place.
Yes. You had mentioned that Dave Shaeffer, he homesteaded in Sinnett. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yes.
He homesteaded the place there where the Sinnett Church is now, just across the road from it. And I see, what was that, 18 and...
This piece of paper says 1893.
Yeah, 93 was the
18
opening.
and 93.
Yeah.
And then his father and my dad came there later on, see.
Yeah. Do you have any idea where the staging area for the run would be in this area?
No, I sure wouldn't.
They didn't mention where that
No.
was. So bring your dad and them on down to Sinnett then.
Well, my Uncle Ben's, he came there and started, he was running the post office and the grocery store there. And that's when my father put one in over in Prue. That was 1905. And they wanted to name the town of Prue Shaeffer, and my dad didn't want him to, so there's no man over there by the name of Prue. So they scratched through Prue, and Shaeffer, and wrote Prue up above it. So that's where Prue got its name.
When and where you got the notion to establish a settlement in Prue? The railroad?
Yeah, the railroad came through there, and it was just straight across from Sinnett. See, it was just straight across the river, about from Sinnett north.
Would you take that, would that road be right past the cemetery, straight north?
No, it'd be the next mile over west. It'd be a mile further west. And they were, at that time, there used to be a ferry back this side of it, but at that time, if you wanted to go over, if the river wasn't up, you just rode your horse or forded in the wagon. People used to cross the river in the wagon, if it wasn't up.
Yeah.
And sometimes they crossed it when it was up in the wagon. They just tie the wagon bed down and take off across the river with their horses.
So they ferried, you could ford the Arkansas about anywhere along that area?
Oh yeah, they just...
Without danger of quicksand or big holes?
Well, once in a while they had a little quicksand, but it didn't bother them too much.
Can you describe the town of Sinnett? It's kind of the hub of the area, I suppose.
Well, the main corner going south was Blackburn place, the old whiskey store, and their store and junk was located in there. And then across the road from it was John Hearn's home,